Alright, so this week we watched The Seventh Seal from 1957, directed by Ingmar Bergman.
Bergman film! I have been cursed for many years.
It is quite correctly referred to as a masterpiece. It's considered historical fiction, or historical fantasy, even though while it has some fantastical elements, the historicity of it is, it contains many anachronisms. So if you're looking for something historically accurate, this is not it, but for God's sakes, it's good enough, watch it anyway. I made it into my list because it's a film from the 1950s. It had been on my personal to-watch list for ages, because it's something that is referenced in several pieces of media I'm a big fan of. This is the film that probably, I want to say, it popularized the notion of challenging death to a game. Obviously there were depictions prior to this of death playing games with people, but not like, you know, as the main. This is like, it's a narrative device here. Like, there's a painting that apparently Bergman was inspired by, of somebody just playing a game of chess with a skeleton, and he's like, yeah, I'll just play with the personification of death. And I'm like, okay, so that's different from that. That is a whole thing. And it's also where we get the imagery of death as like a chalk white figure in a pitch black robe. Oftentimes this is depicted as like somebody, like a skeleton in a robe, but you know, the white figure in robes. If you've watched the second or third Bill and Ted movies, you know where they're pulling this from. And my God, like, you would not have Bill and Ted 2 if it were not for the Seventh Seal. That is a very strange thing to think about, but yeah, this is a masterpiece and it has been very influential. It stars Max von Sydow as the main character, the knight, Sir Antonius Block. Him and his squire are returning home from the Crusades, and only to find that their lands have been stricken with plague. So it's a rough time. And in the first, 10 minutes, I wasn't sure how quickly we were going to get to this. In the first 10 minutes, Death shows up, and it's like, I'm going to play I'm here for you. He's like, well, maybe before you do, why don't we play a game? And so he's playing a game of chess with him through the whole movie. You know, they'll do some moves, and then the plot will advance, and then the next time they have a little downtime, Death shows up again, and it's like, hey, we're ready to move some more. Let's play some more chess. Let's move some more pieces around. Let's do it. Have a little small talk. Along the way, they recruit a couple of actors into their party, a blacksmith, the blacksmith's wife. Basically, a whole cavalcade of people show up along the way and proceed with them to Block's house. The squire is like a very questionable fellow. And I think he's seen entirely too much fucked up stuff in his time at war. And so he's like lost all moral grounding when it comes to his own actions. At one point, he stops a man from sexually assaulting a woman in a town where everybody appears to have died of plague. He stops this guy, and he's like threatening him with a knife, and he tells him to get out of there, or else he'll like cut his face up like they do with scoundrels. And you're like, oh, he saved that girl. That's great. And then he turns around and is like, hey, you know, I could force myself on you too. And then he like tries to make her kiss him, and she like, you know, pushes him off of her, and he's just like, you know, I've done this sort of thing before. I came back from the Crusades. It's not all, you know, picnics down there. And you're just like, Jesus, man. Well, what's the point of you? And the point of him is, he is somebody who, he's the squire to a knight. And you can tell the knight has, like, you know, the chivalrous code, but he's also having, like, a crisis of faith at the same time. And, like, the squire should be, you know, following some sort of moral code, but it's just like he's been through too much, and he no longer applies it to his own actions. So, that's fucked up. The knight's crisis of faith, he's, like, he's in a position where he's like, I no longer believe in God, but he's been off at the Crusades for the last 10 years, and he's like, I want to believe, so I need to like find something that will allow me to accept things. And so like in their travels they come across a witch who's being condemned to death by burning at the stake, because as the folks who are carrying out her execution say, she was caught consorting with the devil to do witchcraft. And he's just like, hey, you, witch person, how do I talk to the devil? And she just looks at him and is just like, why do you want to know that? He's like, I want to ask him about God. Who would know better than him? And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting take on this. And she's just like, if you want to talk to the devil, you just need to look in my eyes. And he looks in her eyes and he's just like, oh, you're just a scared, crazy person. Okay. There's nothing actually going on here. Like, just the mundanity of it. He's looking for answers. And, like, he's willing to go to the lengths of, I will deal with somebody who is being burned at the stake for witchcraft. I will ask the devil himself these questions if he gets me an answer. Just really speaking to one of the classic problems of, philosophy and theology of just, the hiddenness aspect of God. And, like, do you need a good reason? Because you don't really get one, They say you need to take it on faith, and it's like, well, sometimes you need a little more convincing than that. And that's the situation that Sir Block is in. He's been through a lot. He's been off at the Crusades for the last 10 years. He's come home, everything is terrible at home too. And he can't even get a straight answer out of the devil, because he's not even here. It's just a lady who's gone bananas. Possibly because there's so much death going on in the country now. Who knows? I don't want to give like the minutia of this happened and then that happened and then that happened. Suffice to say, death eventually catches up to them, and some people do manage to get away. But it's death. Nobody gets away forever. It ends with a very iconic image, and this image is one of the scenes that actually made me want to watch this originally. At the end of the film, like earlier on in the film, they had a painting that was being done in a church. They stopped along the road, and I had joked, this teeny tiny church. Look at this thing. I joked, oh man, this parish is so poor. Their church is nothing but an apse and like a transept. That's it. And sick architecture burn. Subscribe for more of those. No, but like there's a guy in there painting, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm painting the dance macabre of the dead going to hell. And, over here we have the parade of sinners, the penitent who had the plague. And the squire's like, why would you paint this stuff? He's like, hey man, I don't know. I'm just doing what they told me to paint. I don't choose the subject matter. I just paint it. There's, the plague is supposedly so bad that people like want to claw their own veins out. But somehow there's also like a parade of people that have the plague, and they show up while a play is happening. One of our groups of protagonists who decided to tag along is an acting troupe, and while they're doing a play, the fucking plague parade shows up. The Black Death Parade. When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see the Black Death Parade. And so they're carrying crosses, they're carrying banners, they're whipping themselves, they're whipping each other, they're wailing about how they're horrible sinners, and learn from their example and don't sin or you'll get the plague too. And it's like, that's not how communicable diseases work, but understand it's the 1200s, so you don't know that. What is a germ? They don't know. Oh man. So they ruined the play. Then they were gone. And the end scene is a callback, because it's just death leading all of the dead people as they dance along the horizon in a new Dance Macabre. And this scene shows up in one of my favorite animated series, Mission Hill. There's an episode where one of the lead characters, Kevin, gets really into revival cinema. There's a theater that shows old movies, classics, and he is an uncultured swine, which he's a nerd who watches Star Trek and Star Wars and Babylon 5, and like, that's it. He does not consume things that are artsy, he consumes things that are nerdy. And I understand what that's like, because I was a little bit like that back in the day. Not entirely, but, you know, obviously, get some culture. So, Kevin got some culture. They're watching these movies. He's hanging out with his neighbor, Wally, the projectionist, in the projection booth. And the Seventh Seal is up, one of the things that shows up on screen. And the image that they choose to go with is this dance. So, yeah, one of my favorite animated shows, Bill and Ted, of course. This film has a lot of fingers and a lot of pies. It's entirely in Swedish. So, if you speak Swedish, great. This is for you. If you don't speak Swedish, the director of Parasite put it best when he accepted his award, that the only thing standing between you and a whole world of new films is an inch at the bottom of your screen that contains text.
Once you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to so many more amazing films. Like,
deal with the subtitles. It's worth it. It is worth it. If you have trouble with subtitles, I'd still say give it a shot. You know? It's a classic for a reason. It's well shot. I don't know how much of this was shot outside on location and how much of this was like constructed on a set. But it looks great. I don't know. It's like a running thing with modern films where like the lighting is bad because everything is dark and washed out, and characters are lit differently from the scenes they're in because nobody's actually in the scene where they're filming, because like everybody's just green screened in. And you know, that is one thing that you will be able to deal with in old film, is you can see what's happening. And the fact that this is black and white, you know, I understand black and white film is an automatic turn off for some people, but this is great. This is honestly great. Give it a watch. I highly recommend giving this one a shot. It looks great. It's a masterpiece. Max von Sydow was a giant in the industry. Yeah, give it a watch. And speaking of watching, here's what we'll be watching next week. 3, 2, 1, and go. Okay, so down they go into the Plinko. It looks kind of like a Christmas sweater now, doesn't it? I can see that pattern on a Christmas sweater, sure. They're going through Plinko, and out front is the Innocent, followed by My Colt is a Passport. We have little loops here. This will screw up the order. I cannot tell who is in front because there's two separate tracks. The Velvet Vampire is out front right now. Possibly... Yep, so many split loops make this difficult to call along the way. But it's looking like the Velvet Vampire, followed by the Innocent, is going to be leading the pack here. Over here we have My Dinner with Andre and Mr. Hulot's Holiday coming up on the other side. The Velvet Vampire and the Innocent have split up. Velvet Vampire looks like a wonderful, cheesy, campy, somewhat lesbian vampire story. It's neck and neck with My Colt is It bounced back. It bounced back. Oh no. Now out front is Half a Loaf of Kung Fu and Black Sunday. My Favorite Software is Being Here popped out front somehow. Seven Samurai also here. Are we going to have another situation where I have to take like a short film and then be like, I'll take the next long thing too? Snowflake here to fuck with them. Charade out front now. Things coming down the other side are going very slowly. Charade in the straightaway here bounces off of what do you call these things? Ooh! Black Sunday, pulling out front. Ballard, that's what they are. Repo Man bouncing back. Half a loaf of Kung Fu, surging ahead, into the end, and it sticks the landing. We are watching Half a Loaf of Kung Fu. The follow-up is The Velvet Vampire, A Man Escaped, Here Comes Night Moves, there's nothing between Night Moves and the end, The Sweet Smell of Success, followed by Fellini Satyricon. Wait. Are things dying? Things are dying. Things are dying. Half of these movies aren't landing in the thing. Okay. First place, Half a Loaf of Kung Fu. Second place, The Velvet Vampire, A Man Escaped, Night Moves, Sweet Smell of Success, The Fabulous Baron Munchausen, which we are excited for when it comes in first. My favorite software is Being Her, or Here, Repo Man, Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, and Charade. Also, a bunch of things fell to their deaths. Did not finish. Wow, yeah, so there is our winner officially. Half a Loaf of Kung Fu. Ball number 30, I guess. Alright, let's pull up my list here and see if I can find some information on Half a Loaf of Kung Fu. Half a Loaf of Kung Fu, 1978. It made the list because it is an Asian film. It is a martial arts action comedy. 5.6 out of 10. Just under 100 minutes. Decent length. Directed by Chen Chi-hua. I know that this made it on the list because it's a Jackie Chan movie. It's an early Jackie Chan martial arts comedy. You know, that should be entertaining. If nothing else, he's an entertaining fellow. So yeah, that's what we're gonna watch. Half a Loaf of Kung Fu, which is already a bonkers title for a movie.